America, my name is Osei-Frimpong. Now, often I get in trouble for speaking ill of the dead, which I actually think is the right time to speak either ill or good of them because you get to see their whole life and understand their meaning in the world. And when I say their meaning in the world, I think about how they live in memory. So how does, I got in trouble for when John Lewis passed, saying some unkind things about him because I do not think that he was a good person for the American project, even though he did good work when he was younger in the civil rights movement, from taking out Julian Bond to the 80s and then to selling the entire Democratic Party, which in the South is a lot of black people, over to Clinton in the 90s and 2000s. I am not a huge fan of John Lewis politics, especially in his later life. Right. So, and I said that when he passed, and I got in a little bit of trouble. They actually yanked my segment from Rising about that. And I'm still kind of heated about it because it was a very good segment on how John Lewis sold black people to the worst parts of the Democratic Party in exchange for nothing except a plaque and a few memorial dinners. So now I'm going to speak the truth, my truth about Hulk Hogan. And I think he was a real American. And when I say he was a real American, I it's not just that, blonde and muscly, but he was kind of a meathead tool of other people. And I think that's a lot of Americans are kind of like, meathead tools of other people. And that's how we grow ourselves into being a nation of mid-level managers who are easily flattered into giving away all of our principles. Right. So when I say Hulk Hogan is a mid-level, like a mid-level tool, he was a great American tool. And that says something about us as Americans. I'm referring to, one, his willingness to be a scab and an informer about the union organizing effort from the WWF. Now you know it as the WWE, but back when I was young, it was called the WWF. It turned out Jesse the Body Ventura, who's actually I think a different kind of American, was trying to organize the wrestlers so that they wouldn't, always be taking steroids and wrestling too much and getting injured and eventually dying. In the 80s, wrestling was and it still is, it's kind of a nasty business. I'm old enough to remember the Von Erichs and Kerry Von Erich, and it's just kind of a nasty, nasty business. Insofar as the wrestlers were people who were not particularly sophisticated, who got taken advantage of. And Jesse the Body Ventura wanted to actually organize them into a group that could fight for time off and maybe medical care and all these things that they deserve as professional entertainers, as workers who are creating value for Vince McMahon or whoever owns them. Anyway, so Jesse Body Ventura is trying to organize it, and the first thing Hulk Hogan does is goes and tells on him to Vince McMahon, the boss. That was what Hogan did. And that's a unionizing effort that could have actually saved lives, and definitely ended a lot of pill addictions. But the first thing he did is Hulk Hogan did is go tell the boss. So he is a union buster, not smart enough to be a Pinkerton. That's one of those detectives that actually busted unions 100 years ago. But he was just a tool of Vince McMahon. He was a good company man, good employee. And why is that relevant? Well, he's also, like most Americans, not particularly bright, and was a racist, right? So Gawker unearthed a lot of videos or audios of him, throwing around the national word and being very, or at least marginally eloquent in his use of it over and over and over and over again. And so that got him in trouble at work, and that kind of, depending on who you talk to, ended his career. But now this is the national word over the course of years, and it was just part of his vocabulary and just part of his way of life. And Gawker, an investigative journalism website, along with Deadspin, unearthed these audio recordings. And it's actually hard to do investigative journalism. It takes time and effort. And one of my friends works for Gawker, now works for The Intercept. So like they're actually about that fight. They were actually about that fight. And look, the Epstein list would be all over the world if Gawker still existed. But you know what happened? Hulk Hogan, being the tool that he was allowed himself to be used by Peter Thiel, who had an issue with Gawker for outing him, which, you know, might be a different issue. Peter Thiel is a billionaire, owned PayPal, or founded PayPal, and has his hand in politics. And what he did was he bankrolled Hulk Hogan's lawsuit against Gawker, which eventually drove Gawker out of business because they couldn't keep up with the legal fees. Right? So Hulk Hogan allowed himself to be used as a tool by Peter Thiel in order to bankrupt Gawker, which was kind of not a bastion of investigative journalism, but a model. If you like anything that's at The Intercept, if you like, it's a model of investigative journalism that was actually doing work in a nation that I believe needs more and better investigative journalism. So Hogan allowed himself to be used as a tool by Peter Thiel, who paid all of his legal bills with the express purpose of driving Gawker out of business. So Hulk Hogan, the great American tool, first he sells out the wrestlers to Vince McMahon, the boss, and then he gets used by a different billionaire in order to take out like a model of pretty effective investigative journalism in Gawker / Deadspin. Right? So, and it's funny because Thiel, when interviewed about why he supported Hulk Hogan's lawsuit, he was like, well, you know, Hulk Hogan's just a single-digit millionaire. And single-digit millionaires don't have access to the legal system. Don't really have access to the legal system. So this is Peter Thiel, a billionaire, telling you that if you're just a single-digit millionaire, you're not really in the game. And Hulk Hogan, like most Americans, are not really in the game, except he was willing to be used by Thiel in order to take out Gawker, right? So that is Hulk Hogan, the scab, Hulk Hogan, the racist, Hulk Hogan, the hammer against independent media. And I say that he's a tool because he isn't quite smart enough or canny enough. Like, he is an American in the most non-flattering sense, insofar as he's kind of a big lughead who was used by other people, and he made enough money while he was being used. By not being particularly like morally savvy, he himself got rich and created a lot of pain for those around him, and, you know, degraded the nation's project insofar as he took out independent media. Right? So that's Hulk Hogan. And that is an American, the mid-level tool who's willing to do whatever their bosses say if it gets them their nut, their little bit more money, and is only a little bit surprised when there is fallout for their ethical malfeasance after they're dead. So if you don't want me talking about you like this when you're dead, you or your kids talking about you like this when you're dead, or anybody talking to you or talking about you like this when you're dead, think about how you live. Think about how you live. Are you just a tool for whatever institution you're around against any sort of claims for justice? Jesse the Body Ventura was actually trying to do the right thing in the 80s. He was trying to make a flawed organization better. Wasn't trying to get rid of wrestling, just trying to unionize the wrestlers. Hulk Hogan, being the tool of capital he is, sold out the whole movement to the boss. You know, that is in a lot of ways the American way. And then not just a tool of capital that way. We're talking about, you know, casual with the N-word and, you know, effective in his use and beliefs regarding that, and then being willing, the willing tool of Peter Thiel to take out Gawker, a bastion of independent journalism at the time. And, you know, the nation could use more of that. the nation could use a healthier respect for independent journalism, for real journalism, for investigative journalism, and and it could actually a healthier respect for investigative journalism and the actual content of investigative journalism. The nation could use more. And Hulk Hogan let himself be used as a tool by, not Vince McMahon this time, but this time Peter Thiel, to take out Gawker / Deadspin, to deal with Peter Thiel's personal problems with Gawker / Deadspin. So you just have to think about what it means to be an American when Hulk Hogan is actually, I think, in a lot of ways, emblematic, exemplary. He's an exemplary of a kind of American, a kind of mid-level henchman boss who got rich by talking one way and selling out the ideals the other. In the great American grift. Because honestly, the difference between WWE and American politics is not that much. It could be better. It could be better. But we have too many Hulk Hogans sucking up too much air, doing too much of the wrong things. And that's one of the problems with both America. And I do think that a lot of our politics is kayfabe. Kayfabe is fake. We pretend that they don't like each other, but they actually do like each other. When, Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Anthony Scalia had wine and fish, when they dined together so often because they had true companionship with each other, it's because they were both Antonin Scalia. It's because they're in it together. The idea that they weren't in it together is some sort of fiction that's foisted upon us. Right? The American politics is a work, as the wrestlers would say. It's a game where Democrats pretend that they're not in cahoots with Republicans for the illusion of a contested democracy. And that's where we are, and I think that's unfortunate. But we need to actually, I think, the WWF or WWE American politics analogies and actually remedies are similar. We need to expose the game for what it is and deal with it as maybe if it's just going to be entertainment, we need to talk about it entertainment and then figure out where the decisions are really made. Right? Because if it's just entertainment, if our politics is merely entertainment, we need to figure out who's making laws and why, and who's executing those laws and who's interpreting those laws and why. And it's not just at the superficial level. All right. So that's my screed about Hulk Hogan as the American tool, as almost a quintessential American tool. He's a big lughead. He's a big lughead who was willing to sell you out in any way he could for a little bit more private money. And that's America. Mid-level managers willing to sell you out for a little bit more money. All right. And I'm thinking about the Hulk Hogan theme of the 80s is, I am a real American. It was all kayfabe. It was all an act. It was all a work. But in a way, part of it being a work was he was a real American. That's your mid-level manager who's willing to sell you out to the boss. I mean, what he did to Jesse the Body Ventura's actual effort to unionize the wrestlers, and that effort would have actually saved lives, is atrocious. That would have been enough. But he just kept on being that guy because he was that guy. He would sell out. He would be the racist, and then he would sell out to the highest bidder and allow Peter Thiel to use him as a vessel to take out Gawker. So that's just the truth about Hulk Hogan, and that's just the truth we have to live with. All right, thank you for your time. If you appreciate what I'm saying, and I think you should, go to www.funkyacademic.com, kick in $5, $15, or $50 a month, because, believe it or not, being the first to call out Israel, being the first to do a lot of things, to be the first black man who's not a big fan of BLM for a variety of reasons, or the BLM leadership, that costs you quite a few, wealthy subscribers. So I need you, if you appreciate what I'm saying, and you appreciate me saying it, to go to www.funkyacademic.com and kick in, $5, $15, $50 a month. And I'll keep doing what I'm doing, which I think is good for America. And this is the way I try to generate meaning in the world and how I'll live in your mind. Right? I'm going to do a video once I'm done here. I'm going to do a separate video on hobbies for my kids because it's very important. Because if you don't have hobbies for your kids and you don't have hard hobbies for the kids, then what happens is that they end up playing video games and you end up raising food for other people who actually thought about raising their kids with a little bit more seriousness. So that's going to be my next video, but I just wanted to tell you why Hulk Hogan is both a scab/informer, racist, and a tool of Peter Thiel and against America. And what that means in terms of being a real American. Because there are a lot of Americans who are just the same. Smaller versions. All right? So thank you for your time, and I'm going to come back soon with the other video. Peace.